October 15th, 1946. Hermann Göring avoided the hangman's noose with a cyanide capsule, taking his own life just hours before his scheduled execution at Nuremberg. That night, the tribunal was denied its final act, and somewhere beyond the courtroom and the headlines, an 8-year-old girl named Edda Göring lost her father. Children do not choose their parents, but they often spend a lifetime carrying their names. In the final hours before dawn, Göring made his last move. He had obtained a cyanide capsule despite the security surrounding one of the most closely watched prisoners in the world. How he kept it remains disputed. Some accounts suggest outside help. Others suggest concealment long before the final search procedures. The full truth was never conclusively established. What is certain is the timing. He died only hours before he was to be hanged. In doing so, he denied the tribunal the public completion of its sentence. His death ended his trial story. It did not end the consequences for his family. Edda Göring was born on June 2, 1938, into the highest ranks of the Third Reich. Her father was one of Nazi Germany's most powerful men. Her mother, Emmy Göring, was a prominent actress. From the beginning, Edda's life was marked by status, ceremony, and privilege. She grew up in a world of wealth sustained by power, much of it tied to a regime built on persecution, plunder, and mass violence. The Göring household projected grandeur. Hall, Hermann Göring's estate, was both a symbol of power and a repository for art and luxury, including works acquired through coercion and theft. As a child, Edda would not have understood the machinery behind that world. To her, it was simply home. That is part of the tragedy. Innocence can exist inside systems of enormous evil. It does not erase the evil, but it changes how a child experiences it. In the spring of 1945, the Third Reich collapsed with startling speed. As Allied forces closed in, Göring fled south with his family. The world Edda had known was already disintegrating. When American forces took Hermann Göring into custody in May 1945, the separation was immediate. The family's protection vanished, their status vanished, their property and possessions became subject to seizure, investigation, and confiscation. For the adults, this was political and legal ruin. For Edda, it was a sudden break in reality. The child of one of the Reich's most visible leaders entered the post-war world not as a princess of power, but as the daughter of a defeated and accused war criminal. At Nuremberg, Hermann Göring turned the courtroom into his final stage. He faced charges that included conspiracy, aggressive war, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The prosecution presented an extensive documentary record, witness testimony, and evidence linking the Nazi leadership to systematic violence and mass murder. Göring did not respond with remorse. He responded with performance. He argued, he justified, he reframed. He presented himself as a statesman acting in Germany's interest rather than as a central figure in a criminal regime. It was a calculated strategy, and for a time, an effective one in theatrical terms, but the evidence remained. The tribunal found him guilty. He was sentenced to death. He would not live to hear the trapdoor open. Emmy Göring's post-war life bore little resemblance to the world she had inhabited before 1945. She was investigated in the denazification process. Her public standing collapsed. Property and assets connected to the family were seized or lost. The name that had once opened doors now closed them. Like many relatives of senior Nazi figures, she lived under the weight of stigma, surveillance, and association. The post-war years brought legal scrutiny, social isolation, and financial hardship. The details of her status and penalties shifted over time, but the larger pattern did not. The Göring household had fallen from spectacle to obscurity. By the time she died in 1973, the era that had elevated her was long gone, and the name she carried had become historically toxic. Edda Göring spent much of her life defending her father's memory. She was still a child when he died, old enough to remember him as a father, too young to grasp the scale of the crimes for which he was condemned. That tension shaped her life. In later years, she spoke of him in personal terms: affectionate, attentive, loving. She did not accept the historical judgment against him. She rejected or minimized his responsibility and resisted the broader picture established by scholarship, testimony, and the record of the Nazi state. This was not unusual in one sense. Families of perpetrators often preserve private loyalties long after public verdicts are settled. But in Edda's case, the loyalty remained unusually visible and enduring. She also pursued efforts to recover property or compensation connected to the family's former holdings. Those efforts were repeatedly unsuccessful. Courts and authorities did not separate such claims from the historical reality of Hermann Göring's role in the regime. Edda lived quietly for much of her adult life and largely avoided public prominence. Yet when she did speak, she did so in defense of a father history had already judged. She died in 2018. The record remained. So did her refusal to accept it. There was another Göring. Albert Göring, Hermann's younger brother, has often been remembered as a moral counterpoint within the same family. Accounts from survivors and post-war testimony describe him using his name and connections to help people targeted by the Nazi regime, including Jews and political opponents. Some details remain difficult to verify in full, and his story has sometimes been overshadowed by the notoriety of his brother. But the broad contrast endures. Same family, same surname, different choices. Hermann Göring stood near the center of a regime of conquest and mass murder. Albert Göring is remembered in many accounts for acts of assistance and defiance. Bloodline did not determine the outcome. Character did. Hermann Göring's death did not end the story of his family. It changed its form. Emmy lived the aftermath in disgrace and decline. Edda lived it in loyalty and denial. Neither inherited his power. Both inherited his name. The historical verdict on Hermann Göring was not written by propaganda, but by evidence, documents, testimony, and the record of what the Nazi state did across Europe. Edda could reject that verdict. She could not erase it. That is the lasting tragedy at the center of her life. A daughter's attachment to a father set against crimes too vast for private memory to redeem.